Welcome, folks. We thought today we would talk about Alberta treason. Is it treason that's going on with the separatist movement in Alberta? I feel as an Albertan, I see treasonous acts all the time in Alberta and on a national scale dealing with the U.S. So we thought we'd discuss this a little bit. What do you think it is? Is there a treasonous acts going on in Alberta? Is the separatist movement backed by treason? Is it motivated by treason? And is there reason to enforce laws of treason in Canada and Alberta? These are some of the topics we'd like you to discuss in the comments, and we hope to enlighten you a bit on our take on some of this issue. So, Cal, you were talking about the separatist movement having ties to the U.S. for funding?
Well, it's hard to know whether that news is real or not, but the Premier of BC has suggested that it is real and that anybody participating in discussions with the U.S. government with respect to Alberta leaving Canada is committing treason. So one needs to look at the definition in Canada of treason. They have two levels of treason in Canada, one being high treason, where you kill the monarch, or you assist an enemy at war with Canada, now, or leveling war against Canada, preparing for such actions. The U.S., of course, could threaten to use force against Canada, which would make anyone assisting them treasonous. And the other definition.
Well, hasn't Trump already stated that he is at war with Canada with implementations of tariffs as a source of extortion and threatening to invade Canada, and has done acts against Venezuela and is still acting on trying to take over Greenland? So if you have a war government in the U.S. and that war government says they're coming for you, anybody discussing finances and interlocking their actions with the government of the U.S., that sure smells like treason. I mean, it's a pile of crap, and it is treason. So, I mean, I guess we have to look at our history. Louis Riel would come to mind, where he was trying to take the West away from Canada and was hung for treason.
Yeah, you can't. Well, that's a little different, since he actually executed a couple of people and had an armed uprising, and now we've created a hero out of him because it suits our purposes nowadays, and
Right.
placates certain groups of people. But what the separatists in Alberta are doing is not within the definition of treason in the Criminal Code of Canada. So the treason, the label of treason, is probably not helping anything in this discussion.
Okay. But
Like
it
it,
still
like
seems treasonous to me. If you're telling me a bunch of radicals that I don't see any commonality with at all, tells me as a fifth generation Albertan, you're going to leave Canada or else. No, I'm not. If you don't like Alberta and the fact that Alberta is a province within Canada, why should I leave my country or be forced out of my heritage homeland for the sake of appeasing you, when there's probably a very good chance that you're first or second generation in the province and have no real ties to the province? And we see a bunch of immigrant population from the east coming to Alberta, and I'm not talking from other countries, I'm talking immigrants from within our own country, because they couldn't get jobs in their own communities, and they come to Alberta to bring their work ethics and personalities to Alberta. And like attracts like. Right now, I see Smith sending out the call to all laborers that if you like the idea of separation from Canada, please move to Alberta. And we've got a big flux of Caucasian Easterners of all languages moving to Alberta, and we have high unemployment, but up go the rent and up go the property values from that. I don't know.
Well, in any event, the courts in Canada have spelled out a method in which a province can leave the confederation. It includes various things, including a referendum, etc. And apparently in Alberta, they're at the stage where they're trying to organize a referendum. I'm not sure well that is going to go, but I mean, in a democratic country, if you disagree with the fact that people are speaking this way, you can get out and hammer the doors and talk to the people and tell them why they shouldn't think about leaving Canada, what the benefits of Canada are.
Well, if you
For
look at the
certain,
press out in Alberta, the separatist signatures for separating got front page news all over the media, which have foreign influences and back the conservative movement. There was all sorts of press coverage saying there's tens of thousands that the majority of Albertans want to separate and blah, 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 when in fact it was just a small number of turnout being over exaggerated by the media, and polls show that there's only 30 some percent of the movement supporters here in the province. So you're getting distortion by the media, which should be Premier Smith's job and role to say that does not give fair and equal representation to the people of Alberta to make an informed decision. They're allowing the hype of the news media. And you got to remember, Smith is part of the news media. She has a talk show with one of the largest news media outlets, which gives her an unfair voice against any competitors. But she also has an inside straight to the owners saying, that's fine, you can go and blow this out of proportion and make it look like it's in huge support because I'm behind the separation efforts because I will become Queen Smith of the new country. So you have to be careful of what you're seeing going on. And I think Smith is a poor leader because a strong leader would come out and have balance in the media to ensure that there isn't a bias. And she has obviously got a bias because what brought her to power was this 30% of the radicals voting her in to be leader of the UCP. And when we only have 40% people turn out to the polls, 30% of the people that are radically motivated showed up, and guess what? We get a premier that has dubious methodologies and ideologies that are maybe not that great for Alberta, and we've seen that they're not great for Alberta. So, Cal, why did you leave Alberta?
that's a long story.
Would you ever come back to Alberta? Is there any leadership out here that would bring you back to Alberta?
Frankly, there's nothing about politics anywhere in Canada that attracts me one place or another. If I was to go to Alberta, it would be to visit friends and relatives and maybe go skiing. But I have,
So if Alberta said, hey, we're going to honor all the seniors in Alberta by raising the royalty that the U.S. companies are going to pay on our oil, we're going to demand fair market value, and all the extra $100 billion a year we'll hand out to the seniors in our province, would that entice you to come back? Because that would be, you'd probably get $3,000-$4,000 a month higher senior benefits if we quit giving away all our profits to the U.S. and foreign companies. Would that entice you to come back to Alberta?
The long answer is no.
Yeah, see, even money can't buy you back into this province. And folks, that's the reality. The money we're squandering, and we're allowing the propaganda of the conservative movement in Alberta to say, oh no, it's Quebec taking all the money. No, folks, it isn't. It's the mismanagement of our limited resources. There's only a timeline on our resources, and that's 100 years or less. And the UCP government wants to make that timeline around 60, 70 years supply of oil. And when it's gone, and we're stuck with the bill because we're not getting fair market value for it. And it does affect what you get for social programs in the province. We don't get those social programs, and we get stuck with the higher taxes because of the debts of the government because of mismanagement. In this movement of Alberta separatists and such is not going to help Alberta in the slightest. And there's a list of reasons why. When you're considering this movement of separatist or not to separate, I did up a quick little list. There's a whole bunch of points like, how are you going to deal with the mineral rights that were granted by the federal government in 1926? You got to remember, we became a province in 1905. We were granted under a agreement the rights to own and manage the mineral rights, and it was tied to the treaties in the province for the indigenous population. So that's going to have to be dealt with if you're going to separate, and that means the contract is in breach, which means you're going to have to come up with some way of compensating the federal government and the treaties within the province for that compensation of the mineral rights. And mineral rights apply to oil rights. So now you really have to negotiate it. Is it going to be a royalty? And you might be able to have access to the minerals again? Or are you going to have to buy out those mineral rights outright for a few $1 trillion and be indebted to Canada anyway? Then the second issue is the native claims on treaty land. How are you going to deal with that? If you separate from Canada as independent of Canada, those lands are governed and controlled by the federal government. Are you going to assume the same treaties, or are you going to go into negotiations with the native population, redetermine negotiations, and have to give up more lands and more rights and share the wealth of the province with these natives? The other issue is pipelines. These pipelines are going, once you separate from Canada, these pipelines are going over Canadian lands or leaving the province to the south. So any pipelines heading east or west are subject to those provinces maybe putting a royalty on your oils and goods going across their land. So that's going to get more expensive to ship the oil out, and it's going to be borne by the Alberta new state regime or country or whatever you're going to call yourself. Currency. What are we going to use for currency? U.S. dollar? Cal, what would you see as currency?
The peso, the Alberta
Exactly.
peso. You might as well,
like
yeah, well, it's one of those things that the people who are talking about this are attention seekers, and the
Would it
people
be a
who are,
petrodollar? Because that's
well,
all Alberta would have is petroleum. So we'd definitely be a petroleum dollar, and we'd still owe the Canada for the mineral rights, whatever contract we negotiate, and have to pay in perpetuity to Canada for those rights. So would it still maintain value, a currency in Alberta?
I think what you need to do is look at what happened to Britain because of Brexit, and realize that once you're gone, it's really difficult to make deals. Like you're not going to get the best of everything because the
There's
rest.
buyer's remorse over there on that Brexit in the UK, and I see their whole economy and governance lost big time by not being part of a greater good like European Union. So that would definitely be an eye-opener for these Alberta separatists, because that's the path they want us to go down, and that's a slippery slope that there's no coming back from. And that's a point that people in this separatist movement are forgetting, and they are glory hounds. They want the news, and so does Premier Smith. That's why she's supporting it, and then talks out the side of her cheek saying, no, I don't really support it, but they got a voice, and they're the ones that got me into power, so I guess I better let them have a voice. Well, that to me, folks, is snaky, slimy, and not consistent with good leadership. So this Smith character needs to be removed from power out here once and for all.
Well, that's why there's a leak that says that they would be asking for backup for $500 billion from the U.S. government to support a currency of some sort, or else to be
Take
able to
on the
be in a
U.S.
position.
buck.
Well, you'd have to be in a position to bargain with the world, and the Americans would be glad to help them. Obviously, they would be there, to take the oil. Trump would probably help them by selling it for them.
Can you trust
Uh,
Trump on any deal? We've seen his history of deals. I
and,
mean,
and,
there is no
and
dealing with that guy, and you can't trust any deal that he comes up with, because he may wake up in the morning and have a limp dick and want to go after something, and you're on the menu. So, yeah, it's not good for anybody dealing with Trump.
well, what you could be sure of is whatever deal they made with Trump would be good for Trump.
Oh yeah, yeah, good for
And
Trump and
and
his family, and
and,
and then
and,
the
and
side
what
benefit would benefit Republicans who are propping up Trump in his position. Which
and
leads me up to the other point: is if you're going to separate, you're going to have your courts and own police system. And we've seen how corrupt the courts are in Alberta. We've seen how Smith wants to set up her own police force so she can prosecute or chase down the people she wants and leave her buddies untouched by the court system. And we see that in the medical supply scandal. We see it in interference or attempted interference by her staff to intervene with the justice system with the Coots fiasco. We see her wanting to have the right to take over municipalities, because a lot of municipalities in the province have their own police force, so she wants absolute control over the courts and the police forces for nefarious reasons, because the RCMP are a check and balance across the country, and she wants to remove that. So separation would get the ultimate police force, the RCMP, out of Alberta once and for all, so she can do her own thing. Do you have some input on the ramifications of separatists to a justice system?
well, there's a reason why a premier like Smith would want an Alberta-based police force, and that is because they would take instructions from the government, and they wouldn't be independent. Whereas the RCMP right now pretty much are contracted to various provinces. Ontario and Quebec have their own provincial police forces, and of course that gives them, I guess, a sense of autonomy in that they can direct their police to do investigations and things that may not have been a priority if you didn't own the police force. So
Yeah.
it's difficult to say, right? But
Well,
what
you
you can
look
be
at this
sure of,
latest scandal of Smith saying that she wants absolute influence over the court. And we've heard, that the three justices had to come out and say, no, we're independent of the government, but they're not. The Smith writes the laws, and they to enforce the laws according to what she perceives as the new standards of justice and the laws. So if you're going to set up a new country and have these type of laws in place, you'd probably want to have more understanding. Are they going to be fair laws? What's the Constitution going to be? And are we going to have a more just society here, or just the extension of the UCP and the mishandling of our current justice, and only the wealthy have access to the legal system? So there's some very serious questions. I mean, even within Canada, we need to deal with some of these issues and straighten them out. But removing Alberta from Canada would only magnify the corruption instead of curing the corruption, is my take on it.
and Alberta in negotiations for trade and everything else would get eaten alive.
Yeah,
They
they're
they
not
would
very
definitely be on the
smart in
menu.
business.
Yeah, there's not a chance that they would be able to. I would even say make fair trade deals.
Yeah,
You know,
the
they're
gene
just
pool is pretty
it just
shallow
wouldn't
here,
happen.
and the type of people that get elected in are backed by money, and they have no care and concern for the average person, even though they try to talk like they do, they really don't. And that boils back to, even if we do separate, we've got another problem. We got a lot of internal workers from all provinces across Canada. Now those workers will be immediately immigrants. They'll be immigrant workers. And we know what Alberta does with immigrant workers. We bring up immigrant workers from Mexico to work on, you know, farms and all over, and we allow the abuse of these workers across the province. So, you know, we get these workers from Quebec, the Maritimes, Ontario, Manitoba to come out here and work. Are they going to be abused under an immigration program and try to be forced to move to Alberta? And I think that would be a real problem under people with these radical ideas that are behind the separatist movement. Would you, you know, see any of your buddies in past days want to have to give up Canadian citizenship to be a slave worker in seasonal work in the oil field in Alberta, where they're abused and have limited compensation for when they're injured? That would only get worse, because you have a government that said, hey, you're worth nothing. We're going to try to put no-fault insurance in, where your life value is worth nothing, just like workers' compensation, you're worth nothing in Alberta. And would you really want to move to a province that will now have absolute control over your worthlessness and by the courts and the compensation methods? I don't think so. I mean, we got it bad enough. And folks, by the way, I heard that no-fault insurance is being dropped by the UCP at a UCP meeting. I heard it from a fairly reliable source. My doctor indicated that that's what the UCP did. So I'm thinking that our commentary on no fault has had an impact with the government recently. Even though we have a small viewership, we still have the right people viewing, and I think we just changed the mind of the Alberta government through our podcast and information on no fault insurance.
Well, I'd like to think
So,
that, but I bet you what happened was that Smith, her palm wasn't greased enough, and so they put that on
well,
the
six
back
hundred
burner.
thousand that we know of was greased. Maybe she tried to have her hand out for a little more lickage and stickage. I might agree with that, and didn't get what she wanted. I don't know.
Yeah, it's difficult to say, but I don't think the idea is dead, and that's because insurance industries are one of the industries that have the ear of the government. The rightfully or wrongfully, there are certain industries that have the right profit margins in order to motivate politicians, is I guess the best way to put it. And they have to be organized. Like you can't have an industry that's unorganized in a position to influence government. So that's what I'm thinking. There somewhere out there, there's somebody that has the power to influence the government, and for whatever reason decided that this may not be a good idea at this time. You know, save it for later.
Well, I think we initiated the conversation and brought to light. I mean, we did have quite a few thousand views of the topic, and I think I'm going to pat us on the back. At least we were in the fight, and I think we caused change. Whether that's a fact or reality, let us know in the comments. Did you look at our no-fault insurance? We even paid for a bit of promotion on that one, so I know it went out. Versus other podcasts we don't go out because we don't pay the YouTube channel to put them out. And that is how you get more views, folks. So quit commenting, oh, you don't have very many views. You want us to have more views? Put more comments, put like, and share it with your friends. And comments help us in the algorithm. And if you want to come on the show, please contact us. We'd be glad to. But subscribe. Make sure you're subscribed. Okay, the other issue that I wanted to discuss about separation is, Cal, your favorite topic, If you're going to be a country, you're going to have military. So right now, Alberta doesn't pay anything other than the federal taxes towards military. We don't have Alberta militia. We don't have this or that. And since most of these separatists base their ideology over gun laws and U.S. ideologies of how a country is run, are we going to have militias, a standing army? What's the budget and cost of all that, starting from scratch? It's going to be expensive, folks.
I think there's a lot of things that these attention getters have not thought about. And the reality is right now it's just talk, and it's cheap talk, right? You know, anybody can say anything they want about anything they want, and that's okay because nobody cares, right? But the referendum is going to be a big thing, and I think one of the reasons why they're going with a referendum is to scare the federal government if they can, right? They what they want to do is they want to make a deal, and one of the deals they essentially they're jealous of Quebec and the way in which Confederation works, and that is there's a balance payment that they view as unfair, and quite frankly, I
Well,
think
but their
they're right.
hero here in Alberta was Harper. Harper set that up. Pierre Poilievre was part of Harper's government. He backed that setup for the transfer payment. Blame the source. It was Harper allowed the hydro not to be included into the income calculation for Quebec. And he did that to buy votes in Quebec, folks. Harper wanted votes in Quebec, and he's the one set it up. And you're supporting this nefarious act as if it wasn't a planned act to get votes. And it was planned to get Albertans to whine and cry instead of setting up their own crown corporations to do exactly the same thing Quebec does. And a crown corporation in Alberta over our resources would mean, folks, we pay less taxes. We have top-line health care because we can afford it instead of allowing foreign companies to walk with our assets and our money. And instead, we have to pay higher taxes, get less, and have to put up with these separatist radical whiners in Alberta. So, you know, quit being dumbasses and believe in propaganda and gaslighting. It was Harper. Poilievre, the conservative movement from the West, set all this up for the whining in Quebec issue. The other issue, if you're going to be a separatist, Cal, would be social structures. How much are you going to pay for pensions for us seniors in Alberta? That's my question. Are we going to have the funds for it? We see a $6.5 billion deficit. We see AIMCO losing over $1 billion and the government having to write a law saying we can't go after the people in charge that lost the money. By the way, isn't Harper in charge of AIMCO? There's some real questions there. Are you going to back the high number of single women with kids in Alberta and make it an equitable playing field for deadbeat dads not to be unable to provide their labor and work to the workforce, to all sorts of issues around social issues? And Cal and I were talking some of these social issues and how the pendulum has swung. I'm not going to get into it too much here, but these social issues are very important. Are single families going to be able to afford subsidies from the Alberta government and get access to health care, education, and such? And we've seen how I don't know how you would
Unhinged?
unhinged the Alberta government is towards health care and social services for anybody. They tell you, go get a job, you know, pay for it with a job. You know, you might have to take 2 minimum wage jobs, but, you know, we don't have the ideology in Alberta to assist social programs. We're always under the government's saying, no, you don't deserve anything, only the wealthy deserve everything. So I don't think the separatists have thought how they're going to really deal with social programs. I mean, we have a pathetic record right now, and not, I mean, I remember Ralph the Clown throwing money on the ground at a hospital for where men were sleeping, telling the guy to go get a job. And the guy probably had a job, he just couldn't afford to pay rent and was living in the shelter. And how belittling is that? And a statement of acceptance that if you're poor, you deserve to be poor in Alberta, and it's only because you didn't work hard enough for your overlords for minimum wage that you're in that situation. So if you're going to separate from Canada, where Canada tries to prop up the morals of the province by transfer payments for health care, transfer payments for education, we're opening the Pandora's box wide open here in Alberta for these radical morons to really sock it to the poor and create inequality across the board, where only the wealthy have access to the services that can be provided in Alberta.
Yeah. To be fair to Ralph Klein, he was drunk when he did that.
Well, yeah, I
Like,
mean, he
like,
could afford the whiskey.
yeah, he was
it had
drinking
nothing
when
to
he.
do with arrogance.
Yeah, he was
And
drinking.
thinking you're above
Yeah.
everybody else. No, it had nothing to do with that. Like, okay, so we know that we're going to have a whole bunch of drunks in government here, because even Kenny went around with a truckload of whiskey handing it out to get votes to get elected in across the province. So there was a study come out yesterday saying alcohol is the #1 drug problem in the world when you analyze all the side effects of the drugs, and they went through a whole list. Alcohol came out on top. Marijuana was down the list quite a ways, and it even was worse drug than fentanyl. So folks, you might want to find that study. If I can find the link to the story, I'll put it in the description. But alcohol is the #1 drug issue in the world, and Alberta is known for a lot of alcoholics being in power, and usually alcoholics have swollen faces, swollen eyes. You can see it in a lot of the leadership where they go and party a lot to garner votes and what have you. Being a non-drinker per se, I do drink once in a while, but not very often and not very much, but you do see that.
Well, Corey,
they have a
you'll be
lot of
happy.
buddies that are drunk.
You'll be happy to know that I drink your share.
Well, that's good. And enjoy the gout that comes with it. I prefer not to have the pain of gout. So that's sort of the social issues of separation. And then you got the other issues of all these federal lands. Who's going to buy these federal lands within the compounds, like the Banff National Park? You've got all these federal programs that are very costly. If Alberta was to separate, we'd have a lot of expenditures and acquisition of assets that are federal-owned assets. And then back to the big issue is we're landlocked, folks. We have no access to international waters anywhere, which means we're not very good at negotiating deals, because we're ripped off left, right, and center in oil deals all around us. So we're probably not going to do too well with that. And then since we're going to have to also calculate in separatists, there's a whole bunch of debt that goes with separation, including abandoned wells, our environmental impacts. Now, because we're a separate country, when the mercury leaches out of the landfill in Ponoka into the Battle River through Poilievre's riding, and it heads out to Saskatchewan and into the Great Lakes, we're going to have lawsuits and liabilities from Canada saying that this is the responsibility of the new country of dumbass Alberta. So you got some problems there, folks. And I'm sure there's a few other issues we didn't really touch on, but
well, I think one of the points that you've missed with respect to the separatist movement, the word "buy." I
well,
don't
they're
think they
getting
have.
it. They're stealing it. Well, I got that. They're going to steal from Canada to claim it's theirs, and then there's that issue. And I mean, it's the Trump model: steal it, line your own pocket
Well, just
in the
cut out the middleman.
transition, cut out the middleman. So I do believe the whole system in Alberta is corrupt to the core, because it's like the same government running everything for over 50 years, and we only had a small stint of a different government, and they were undermined by the outside foreign influences in the oil industry to make sure they never got back into power. So it's like diapers, folks. The shit stinks out here in Alberta really, really bad, and you only have to lift up a carpet to see the pile of shit under it. And that's only going to get worse if we separate. These clowns that are profiting off the corruption right now are going to be wolves at the trough, trying to eat every scrap of the they can come up with to make profits off of the ignorance in Alberta in the transition. It's just like the Trump syndrome down in the US, and it's going to be really bad. And we're going to probably have, you know, my guess is if the separatist movement shows light and gets traction, the US is going to send their military right into Alberta immediately after the referendum. Whether the referendum is good or bad results, we're going to have the military of the US come up here and say, no, we're backing the separatists. And that's a problem, big problem. And I see that as a reality.
That could happen. But then if that happened, you would be actually into the definition of
Treason.
treason.
Yes, but like the barn doors open, it's a little too late at that point. You've just undermined all of Canada. It's just a stepping stone for further havoc, and that's probably not a good idea. So true leaders would not have dealt with this issue in the fashion that they're dealing it right now, and true leaders would not fan the fuel of radical movements. We have that in our government right now, where they're fanning the fuel of radicals, and it goes back to everything from COVID-19 to measles outbreaks to all these fanatical, irrational ideologies that are causing harm in the province and to our world image. And that is a problem when you start analyzing all the components of it. And that's my take on it. And I think it's time we tried to be more level-headed and more educated and more rational in our thought. Critical thinking is lacking here in the province, as we're trying to show you. If you're part of the separatist movement, you got a problem. You know, level-headedness is one of your problems. And the other issue is, if the separatist movement does get traction, how are you going to deal with people like me? I'm not leaving unless I'm in a 6-foot box. So you're going to have a civil war in Alberta, period. And that's it. I'm not being forced out by a bunch of anti-COVID, anti-vax, ivermectin sucking slew water morons promoting radical, borderline treasonous acts when
Tell us how you really feel.
yeah, really, you know, anybody knows me knows I'm pretty much, you know, if you can convince me with fact and documentation and rational critical thinking, okay, I might be convinced. But being a meathead and a moron, spouting rhetoric and thinking you know things that the rest of us don't know, and your IQ isn't my shoe size, I got a problem with you. And if you got a problem with me, come on the show. You know, I'm sure you'll educate everybody. You know, write in the comments. I mean, did you see some of the comments we get? Holy Jesus, folks. have another drink or have another hoot of something. I don't know what you're on, but you're not thinking rational. And you think slandering me is going to bother me? Christ, I've been slandered by the best. You know, like, go ahead, call me every name under the sun. But you make sure it's something you'd call me to my face. You know, then you might get my attention. But you know, it's pathetic out there in Alberta. It's like we're showing how uneducated and moronic we are, and what has happened is the radical movement has brought out all these nefarious actors to be more vocal, and we're seeing more racist comments than ever before, folks. I've never seen such racism showing its ugly head in the province. And that's pathetic, it's unwarranted, and these radicals are getting traction as a result of the inability of our voters to vote in proper governments in Alberta.
That's democracy. People have choices. You may not like the choice, but the fact of the matter
I've had
is,
to put up with it all my adult life. Since I was 18, we've had conservative morons guiding us down a path to destruction, and we get nothing for our assets except the bills. And to be blinded by that fact is even, I laugh at people how stupid they are, because we could have been a very wealthy province and propped up Canada. Instead, we gave all our resources away and our assets away to foreigners. And they're laughing all the way to the bank, and we're laughing all the way to higher taxes and having to pay the cleanup costs. So, you know, it's stupid is as stupid does, and Alberta's as stupid as it gets. There's a whole 50-year record of it. And yeah, people say, well, you can't go back 50 years and laugh at it. Well, yeah, you can, because nothing's changed here. You haven't changed the diapers, you haven't changed your mentality, and you haven't got governments that are here for us, the people of Alberta, and for the people of Canada. You've got the wrong people. They couldn't manage a hot dog stand. I mean, look at your premier. She's a journalist, media. She promotes ideas, and every soundbite is to garner a following that sells ads on the news outlets, etc. She ran a restaurant. Well, that's nice. You know, that's the grounds to run a province, as you could run a restaurant out of a small town. I mean, come on. Give your head a shake.
Was she successful?
Well, I'm sure she sold a lot of her excess oil for diesel fuel. I don't know. Probably not.
No, she said a restaurant.
Probably was successful because she had all the UCP holding meetings there. Yeah, like you can propagate your own success when you're affiliated with radio shows and stuff like that. You would get free press to a restaurant, and being in a political party, you could draw people there to meet you. So yeah, she probably did quite fine with her restaurant, but that's not running a government. That's not understanding big business. That's not understanding multi-international rape and pillage ethics. That's not understanding how to negotiate contracts with businessmen. That's not the skills you need. That's the kiss-ass skills and the manipulative skills, the marketing skills, the gaslighting skills. Yeah, she excels in all that stuff. And you're seeing the results. So I don't think these recalls should be ignored. I think these recalls are very important at this time in Alberta history to make sure that we change out our government and have a proper election without outside influence in our election.
So when is this?
And the money comes from outside influence.
When are these referendums supposed to start?
I'm not following it. I'm so apathetic to the morons in Alberta. It's like I think they've got a month or two yet to get the signatures, and if they don't get enough signatures, there's no recall.
You know, the Americans would like nothing better than to pull Alberta out of the Confederation.
Well, they're doing
it would
everything.
make,
They're the money behind it all.
yeah, they would like nothing better.
Yeah, and that's the problem, folks. And when you wake up and realize that the wealthy are telling you and I what we're going to get and receive, you understand why you have the lowest minimum wage in the country. So we have the lowest minimum wage in the country because the wealthy know that our politicians are paid and bought for and do as they're told. They're lackeys to the wealthy. And in a low population province like Alberta, it's not hard to find the people willing to be bought and sold and do your bidding as a wealthy person to ensure your wealth in the province and that Albertans don't get their fair share. And believe me, we're not getting our fair share of the money generated in Alberta. It's leaving not to Quebec, not to the rest of Canada. It's leaving to foreign international corporations. Just because a corporation is registered in Canada doesn't mean it isn't foreign owned. So just look at Timmy's. Tim Hortons, foreign owned.
Yeah, I
You think
refuse
it's
to
a
go there.
Canadian corporation? It is not. It's incorporated in Canada with foreign ownership, period. On that note, anything else you want to discuss on Alberta treason and subscribing to our channel helps us.
Well, I think that would be nice if people would subscribe to the channel, but I think the way to handle, these separatists is just don't give them too much press.
Well, they're getting all the press because the press is foreign influence media that wants the separatists to succeed. And that's why you see this, the separatists are getting traction, everybody's lined up. You see the hype and the gaslighting by this media, it's not even reality. 30% is not making 70% like they're claiming in the press. So
well, the other side of that is this is the way the Americans work. They destabilize first, then they set up opposition groups, and then they, I mean, this is how they work. They've done this before. It's a
they got a well-oiled organization to subvert governments and politicians around the world, and Alberta has been subject to it since 1979.
They've done it before. They're going to do it again.
They're very successful in raping and pillaging Alberta, and that's only because we, Albertans, allow it. You don't want discussion and dialogue with people like me that try to uncover why we're losing our asses and our taxes are going up when we should be one of the wealthiest regions in the world, period. So on that note, share, like, subscribe, comment, ask to be a guest on our show. We're going to get that figured out one day soon, and enjoy the
rest of your week.
Yeah. Take care.
Bye.
Subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and please share the video. Don't be afraid to share this commercial with your friends too.